learning that information is going to help you feel more confident each and every time you do it. Anytime we have like those nervous little feelings, just remember that it's the first day of school, but eventually you will feel more comfortable and confident just like you do on the last day of school.
Hello and welcome to the Eat More Carbs podcast. My name is Jenna Fisher and I'm here with my co-host Reilly Beatty.
Before we jump into today's episode and our high and low section, this is just a quick reminder that if you are not sick of Jenna and myself and you want to work together one-on-one in one of our sports nutrition concierge coaching programs, make sure that you apply using the link in our bio. We are currently accepting new athletes and new clients who want to meet their goals.
Reilly, what's your high and low?
So my high and low are both food related. I'm going to start off with my low, and that is the price of cereal. I am shook right now that you cannot get a box of cereal for like less than $7. And I love cereal. It's one of my favorite carbohydrates. And it just makes me really sad because I don't know if I can pay $7 for a box of cereal.
I saw somebody the other day that posted and it was like, my grocery bill is looking like my car payment.
That's in my soul right now. That's, yes.
What's your high?
My high. So my favorite food is cupcakes. And I have shared it, I think, on this podcast before, but it's always an interesting favorite food as a dietitian. Get lots of, thoughts on that. But my favorite food is cupcakes. And my favorite place to get cupcakes is Sprinkles Cupcakes.
Okay, this is such a good thing for me to know because there's a Sprinkles kind of close to where I live, I guess you could say. I drive past it sometimes. That's a better way to say it. But I've always been curious if it's worth it or not. So
it is actually. So this is a side note, but the first time I've ever had Sprinkles Cupcakes, one of my best friends in college, her mom would send us them or bring them with her when she would come visit her because we didn't have one. Like we don't have Sprinkles in North Carolina, but they're like in LA, in Phoenix, like Dallas, New York, all the big cities have them, like DC. So I definitely miss my Sprinkles Cupcakes because I no longer live in the LA area. But the owner of Sprinkles Cupcakes followed me on Instagram. And I about fell out of my chair. And I swear, because I work with athletes, I would never fangirl over an athlete, but I'm going to have to fangirl over the Sprinkles Cupcake owner. She's also on Shark Tank. That's probably how people know her better. I am very excited that she follows me on Instagram.
It's a big day for you.
I'm very excited over here.
Congrats on the follow.
Thank you. She probably decided to unfollow me now after she's like, this girl is ridiculous, but very excited. What about you? What's your high and your low?
My high and low for the next, I don't know how many weeks might be Olympics related. I've shared before, I really love the Olympics. At a certain point in my life, I was measuring my time by Olympics. I'd be like, how long has it been? And I'd be like, 2 Olympics. It's been 2 Olympics for me. Anyway, I'm just a big fan. I love the Olympics. I was watching the trials the other day. And if you don't know, I spent a good portion of my life coaching competitive swimming. I'm watching the men's final and they're announcing the competitors. And they say this swimmer is from my hometown. And I was like, oh, no way. How cool. And then the name pops up. And this is an athlete that I coached when he was 9, 10, and 11 years old. And he was swimming in the Olympic finals. And it was just such a cool moment to see somebody that the last time I had seen this athlete, they were just new to swimming. And now to watch him compete on one of the biggest stages in the sport was really, really cool. But it was just really cool to see that kind of come full circle and see how you can make such a big impact or have a big impact on somebody's sport career, even really early on. I don't know. It was just really cool to see.
And I also have chills. And I think you had a really great impact on him because he still stayed with the sport, especially at such a young age. And there's a lot of coaches out there that might not have good impacts on young athletes and therefore they leave the sport.
Well, thanks. My low kind of plays off of that, which is that time is going so fast and not just all of a sudden I've blinked and we're in the middle of 2024 and it feels like just yesterday it was, still 2020. Time is going so fast from a standpoint of the last time that I had seen that athlete, he was so young and now I was looking at him swimming in the Olympic trials as a full-grown man, and I felt like it was just yesterday that I was coaching swimming. So time is going so fast. Time is so precious, and I just all of a sudden had this big feeling of, oh my gosh, there's so much that I still want to get done, and kind of a very weird, how can I slow time down? So that's my low. It's just that I just wanted it all to stop and slow down because it's just going too fast.
Way too fast. I still think Michael Phelps is going to compete in the Olympics, and it's been almost Like what, 10 years?
2 Olympics. Today's guest is Amanda Ciprich. Amanda is a registered dietitian and she specializes in type 1 diabetes. She herself was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 18, and her experience both personally and professionally has led to her helping so many clients. She's also the author of 2 books, and she's the founder of the Type 1 Diabetes Nutritionist, which is a virtual insurance-based private practice. We're so excited to have her on the podcast today to be talking all about type 1 diabetes and exercise. Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so excited to chat with you a little bit today. Before we get into some of our bigger questions for you, can you share a little bit about your background and your journey to becoming a dietitian?
So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes my senior year of high school when I was 18 years old. So that was quite a whirlwind. I knew going into college that I always wanted to major in some type of science, health field. Didn't know exactly where I wanted to go exactly. I was applying as a gen bio major. Diagnosis happened, changed a lot of things, trajectory of my life, and I eventually found nutrition. And I thought that was really interesting. Eventually, I pursued nutritional science dietetics at Rutgers, my undergrad. I completed a coordinated accelerated program with University of Rhode Island where I did my master's and my dietetic internship, and I finished all that in 2017, which is like crazy to think about. But I have been worked in like various settings and been in my own private practice since 2020.
When you were diagnosed with diabetes, did you meet with a dietitian at all?
I did. However, because I was 18, I wasn't put into pediatrics. I went straight into adult endocrinology. A lot of the discussion around food was very restrictive. It was like very black and white, eat this, not that. And initially, how I pursued a career in nutrition was probably not for like the most healthy intentions. A lot of my diagnosis had triggered a lot of disordered eating for me and perfectionism and all fun things. Now that I've gone to school, I've healed my relationship with food, all of that. It's kind of been very full circle, but I know that my experience is also a common experience that a lot of type 1s experience as well. So I wanted to kind of be the person that I didn't have when I was diagnosed.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, not that unfortunately you had to go through that situation, but I feel like most of us as dietitians now share like a similar story, and it's amazing that you're now a resource that you could have really benefited from. Before we jump into lots of questions about type 1 diabetics with athletes, do you mind giving us a little bit of a background for somebody who might not be as familiar with type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, so type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. It used to be known as like juvenile diabetes, but research now has been showing that you can get type 1 at any time. Basically what happens is there's no insulin production, so we need to get insulin from an outside source. So some people are injecting insulin, they are using insulin pumps. There's a lot of great technology that's out there with insulin pumps. I have my CGM right here on my arm. We need to supplement with insulin in order to manage our blood sugars and keep them within a healthy range.
So how would that maybe affect an athlete who might have type 1 diabetes?
So exercising or activity in general with type 1 diabetes can be kind of complicated. I feel like a lot of education around type 1 diabetes in general is often very like, hey, just do this. If you just do this one thing, everything will be great. So a lot of times, like the general rule of thumb that often gets tossed around with exercise is like eat 15 grams of carbs before exercise and like you'll be good. And what by good means is like your blood sugar typically like doesn't go low and you have to stop exercising. However, there's like no like layers to that, and I feel like that gets very confusing for a lot of people. I know from like my own personal experience, I would like eat a Quaker granola bar, like walking into the gym, and I'd be like, all right, well, hopefully I don't go low, because like that's also really scary. Eat a granola bar, workout, and then I'm leaving the gym and my blood sugar is just like going higher and higher and higher, and I'm like, what did I do wrong? That doesn't make any sense. I did exactly what I was supposed to do, not realizing that like the type of exercise, how long I'm exercising, all of these things are like factors that I should have been considering. And I was like, well, they just told me to eat a snack and that's what I did.
So, what are some common challenges someone with type 1 diabetes might face during that training and exercise? You mentioned kind of like lows and highs, but how do they navigate that?
The challenging part about type 1 diabetes is it's not just the time that we're exercising. We have to keep our blood sugars in range. We often have to prepare for that period. So it's before exercise, during exercise, and after exercise as well, that we may need to do some type of intervention in order to keep our blood sugars within range. So that is likely the hardest part. Is it's not just an hour workout. It's the prep beforehand and potentially after. If it's a really intense workout, it might be in the middle of the night having a low blood sugar because our liver is restoring all that stored glycogen for us.
When you talk about intervention, does that mean like eating a snack, or does that mean like dosing insulin, or does that mean both?
It can mean a lot of different things. So a lot of times there's not many variables we have a lot of control over. So someone in particular, like say they're someone with type 1 diabetes that is in a group competitive sport where like they have practice at 6 p.m. Can't change the time of practice because your blood sugar isn't where you want it to be. Can't change the program workout because you are having a high blood sugar and want to start a different type of order of exercise to help you out. So a lot of things we sometimes can't control, which can be really challenging for people that do more competitive sports or team sports. Things that we can manipulate, so to speak, comes down to the food that we're eating, when we're eating it, how much we're eating, the timing that we're eating it. If we can manipulate the actual activity, the duration and the intensity, and then also our insulin dosing. Sometimes that's also something we can't manipulate. We can kind of influence sometimes, but if we're exercising at 6 o'clock, but we ate at 3 o'clock, we may still have active insulin in our system that can't really take it away if it's still there. So that's where a lot of the planning can be pretty challenging because we have only 3, but those 3 are kind of complicated.
We always talk about on this podcast that we should rename it from Eat More Carbs to It Depends, because with nutrition, it really does depend. And it sounds like it's so individualized with the clients that you work with.
Yes, and it's individualized for each person, but it's also individualized like day to day because like if I wanted to go and exercise right now, what I'm going to do is going to look different than what I'm doing tomorrow or next because all of the variables that I'm facing are different.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your Eat More Carbs pillow in the background?
The other side actually says eat more kale, but we are permanently on this side of the pillow. I've had it for, I think I saw it at a store and I was like, oh my God, I need that. And it's great for a conversation starter. I mean, it worked on this podcast, but it's been a conversation starter for podcasts. And a lot of my clients come to me with maybe not having great experiences with healthcare providers and maybe felt like they were being judged for their food choices, may have a more challenging relationship with food. So I feel like it's like an icebreaker to show them that like I'm not here to judge their food choices. I'm totally here. Like, I'd rather teach you how to dose for eating a slice of pizza than tell you absolutely not. You can't have pizza with type 1 diabetes.
We love that. We love carbs. So you mentioned a little bit about like people maybe having like bad experiences. You had, not the great experience yourself. So if you have, are working with an athlete or a client that might be new with type 1 diabetes and they're a little nervous about introducing and including more carbs into their fueling plan, where do you recommend that they start?
The analogy that I use for anyone that's newly diagnosed is usually like the first day of school. So first day of school, you don't know where your classes are, you don't know your locker combination, maybe you walk into the wrong class for like the wrong period, but by the last day of school, you can basically walk around the hallways of your school like backwards and blindfolded and like fully confident. When you're newly diagnosed with diabetes, you are doing everything for the first time, and that's really, really scary. So you get those like nervous jitters, but every time you do it, you are learning, and that learning, that information is going to help you feel more confident each and every time you do it. Anytime we have like those nervous little feelings, just remember that it's the first day of school, but eventually you will feel more comfortable and confident just like you do on the last day of school. To tie that into carb intake, Likely starting smaller. So I was sharing with a client yesterday because we talked pretty in depth about exercise. I was like, I'm not a runner, but if I decided to just like get up and go and like just say I'm gonna run a 10K or half marathon with like no training, my body's probably gonna be like, SOS girl, like what are you doing? And I'm gonna have 1,000,001 low blood sugars. But if I start by like doing like a walk jog mile, I'm not only building up my tolerance with exercise, I'm learning how to see like where my thresholds are in regards to my blood sugar on, okay, can I run 3 miles without needing carb supplementation, without my blood sugar going low? Where is like the threshold that I need my starting blood sugar to be with being able to exercise without needing supplementation? Is a starting blood sugar that's like at 200, does that make me feel like foggy and I feel like my performance isn't that great? All of it is really helpful information, but the more we can start smaller and work our way up, it can help us further build up that confidence.
I think that's something Reilly and I talk about all the time is we have to start small and slowly build up those changes. And it sounds like there's a lot of overlap there too.
Yeah, I know the feeling of like wanting to just like jump in and just do it and get the round rolling, but I like to think of it as like I don't want to push someone into like the deep end when like they don't know how to swim, because that's like really scary. And especially with type 1 diabetes, having a low blood sugar feels really scary. Your heart is racing, you're sweaty, you're clammy. Depending on how low your blood sugar is, it can feel really terrifying for a lot of people. So we also want to make sure that we're being safe as well.
I love your analogies. They're great. Keep them coming.
What are maybe some common myths about type 1 diabetes that you'd want to debunk?
Oh my god, there's literally so many that are like tied for number one.
Give us your top 3.
Ooh, what did I eat as a kid? Like, what did my parents feed me type of thing? Can't eat carbs, or I should do some weird diet, and insulin's bad. Yeah, like there's a lot of like, I'm like, I need this. Why is it bad? That's so weird.
Social media has made it really bad.
Yes, I just recently just had a reel. I recently got married and I was chugging a juice box and fist pumping like this. And it got to like the wrong side of the internet, and the things that people were saying to me. I've been diagnosed for 12 years now, and I thought it was like scary, like the misinformation that I got when I was diagnosed. But to even see that misinformation out there and the lack of understanding about type 1 diabetes a full decade later, I was like, wow, that's absolutely terrifying. And I like really hope that those people don't end up in a situation with type 1 diabetes where they're like, yeah, just eat like a carnivore diet and that will solve everything. And I'm like, no, I would still actually need to take long acting insulin. But okay.
Speaking of the internet, there's a huge push from like wellness influencers, we'll just call them, to wear a continuous glucose monitor, even if you are not a diabetic. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I have some mixed reviews. So I wear a CGM in my management and it is incredibly helpful. And it has changed my life in so many ways and I'm really thankful for it. It isn't accessible to a lot of people with type 1 diabetes. And that comes from a lot of layers. That's 3D pharmaceutical companies. It's the healthcare hierarchy. It sometimes feels like a slap in the face for people with a chronic condition that have such a challenging time dealing with the back and forth with their insurance and their distributor, that they can't get this, and then they realize that it's $100 or hundreds and thousands of dollars on top of their already high copay or high premium that they have to pay. And then some wellness influencer is just like, look at what I'm doing for fun. It feels icky. And I can definitely understand that because they have the choice in wearing it and we don't have that choice. Our choice is mostly like, can I afford to pay it? Not like, hey, what's like the most fun thing I can do for myself? A lot of the people that are wearing them, it's not necessary. A lot of people that are wearing it feel like monitoring blood sugars is like this like new ultra health thing. And like, don't get me wrong, blood sugar management is incredibly important. But if you have no risk factors, why aren't we just like getting our annual labs and like like testing our fasting blood sugar with like a little finger prick. That's likely easier to monitor. While I'm on this topic, the actual manufacturers that are making these devices have a bone to pick with them too, because a lot of times they say that they can't decrease the costs of the product because they have to pay for the supplies, the workers transporting all the things everywhere, whatever. So it's really interesting that they can't reduce the price for people with diabetes, but somehow they can increase their production for all these people without diabetes. So it further shows like profits over people, which is something that like I don't really love. And I know a lot of people in the community don't love either. So I do feel like torn on the topic because yeah, monitoring your blood sugar, it's not harming anyone. So it's also like, if you can, why not? But it does feel like a slap in the face for people in within like the chronically ill community. Outside of like the wellness area, I think CGMs have a really great place in other areas of health. That's actually what I wrote my master's on. I'm using it in people that are in critical care in the ICU, neonates, preemies that are born early and they don't have a fully developed liver and they have really low blood sugars that can reduce their brain development later on in life if they're not getting adequate glucose. People on dialysis without diabetes, PCOS. There are so many other areas that people can benefit from CGMs. So I'm just upset with like our society in general that like we're pushing these on like helping healthier people get healthier, but not helping the people who have these other conditions that could benefit from this technology. Like, why aren't they being marketed to people with PCOS and things like that?
So, Amanda, we ask this to everybody on the podcast. We have 4 questions, and the first one is, because this is the More Carbs podcast, what your favorite carb is?
If an appropriate answer is like all of them, I'm not very picky. But if I had to pick like a carb to eat for like the rest of my life, it would likely be like French fries, but like the shoestring, ultra thin with a lot of salt. I'm getting
The ones like you
very
get at the
specific.
fair. I feel like it's like a fair fry.
Yes.
What's your favorite pre-workout fuel?
Usually just grab a banana. Nothing crazy. Banana and electrolytes.
Simple stuff works. What's your favorite post-workout fuel?
Usually when I'm exercising, I try to exercise right before a meal, so I'll just eat like lunch or dinner, whatever meal's next. I'm not a morning workout person in any capacity, absolutely not.
And then seems to be the hardest question on the podcast, but we're big shoe people here. So what is your favorite pair of kicks?
Right now, I've been really liking my Hoka's Rincons. They're like super lightweight, like feels like I'm not even wearing shoes. So really love them. And my second favorite, I have New Balance Free Foams. Really love those. Those are so bouncy.
I have both of those too. I'm a big Hoka girly as well.
Amanda, thank you so much for being on this episode. I know both Reilly and I learned a lot, and hopefully all of our listeners learned a lot too. For people who want to follow you or find you on social media, what's the best way for them to do that?
My largest platform is Instagram. My handle is T1D.Nutritionist.
If you have questions for Reilly and I, you can always leave them below, or you can find us on Instagram. We're at the Eat More Carbs podcast. You can find Reilly on Instagram at Reilly.Beatty.Nutrition, and you can find me at Jenna.Fisher.Nutrition. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.